We toss around the words risk and uncertainty like they're the same thing all the time, but it turns out they're not even close. In fact, our brains and our bodies know the difference, and that distinction has a huge impact on pretty much everything, from our stress levels to the choices we make every day.
So to really get this, let's start with a little thought experiment, a simple bet that reveals a whole lot about how our minds are wired.
All right, take a look. Which one are you picking? Option A, you've got a normal fair die. Roll a 4, 5, or 6, and you win. Simple. Option B, the bet is the same, but the die is a total mystery. It could be loaded in your favor, it could be loaded against you, you just have no idea. Now, for most people, there's a real gut feeling here, a strong pull toward one of these. How about for you?
So, whichever one you chose, your decision really boils down to this fundamental difference. Risk is when you know the probabilities. With that fair die, you know you've got a 50% shot. The outcome's a mystery, but the odds are crystal clear. Uncertainty, on the other hand, is when you're flying blind. With that weird biased die, you don't know the outcome and you don't know the odds.
And this preference we have isn't just a quirk, it's a famous phenomenon called the Ellsberg paradox. Imagine you've got two big jars of marbles. One has exactly 50 red and 50 black. You know the odds. The other has 100 marbles, but the mix is a secret. If I tell you you'll win money for pulling out a red marble, which jar do you choose? Most people go for the one with the known 50-50 odds. But here's the wild part. If I change the game and say you win for pulling a black marble, people still stick with the known jar. Logically, it makes no sense, but it's powerful proof that we are deeply wired to avoid uncertainty.
So, you'd think that this is all settled science, right? Risk is one thing, uncertainty is another. But what's really surprising is how often this distinction gets completely missed, even in scientific research. And that can lead to some really flawed ideas.
I mean, check out this quote. It nails the problem perfectly. It's saying that a ton of studies out there claim to be measuring how we handle risk, but the tools they're using are actually testing how we deal with pure, unadulterated uncertainty.
And here are a couple of perfect examples. You've got these two super common tests in psychology. The first one asks about the risk of something like going camping in the wilderness. But what are the exact odds of that? I mean, who knows? That's not risk, that's uncertainty. Then there's this other task where you pump up a digital balloon, but you have no clue when it's going to pop. Again, they call it a risk task, but since you don't know the probability, it's a classic case of uncertainty.
Okay, so why are we splitting hairs here? Risk, uncertainty, does it really matter what you call it? The answer is a resounding yes, because this isn't just about words. This is about biology. Your body and your brain treat these two things as completely different experiences.
And the evidence is coming from all over. We see it in economics, with our aversion to ambiguity. We see it in psychology, where uncertainty is linked to specific disorders. And we see it in neurobiology, where we can literally map the brain's different responses. They all point to the exact same conclusion.
In fact, let's peek under the hood. When you put people in a brain scanner, you can see this in real time. Present them with a calculated risk, and the reward processing parts of the brain light up. But the moment you introduce pure uncertainty, where the odds are a mystery, bam! A whole different network kicks into gear, including the amygdala, which is basically the brain's alarm bell. This is hardwired stuff.
So this isn't just for labs and brain scans. Let's bring this home and see how it plays out in an area of our lives that is often packed with unknowns, our relationships.
Researchers actually have a name for this: relational uncertainty. It's that nagging doubt about where you stand with someone. And it usually comes from one of three places: being unsure about your own feelings, being unsure about your partner's feelings, or being unsure about the future of the relationship itself.
So what does all that doubt actually do to us physically? Well, a study looked into this by measuring cortisol, the body's main stress hormone, and the results were striking. As you can see, people who felt highly uncertain about their partner's commitment had a much bigger spike in cortisol after a stressful conversation. The uncertainty was literally causing a physical stress reaction.
And that's really the crucial point here. Feeling uncertain about where you stand with somebody isn't just an uncomfortable thought. It's a measurable physical stressor that takes a very real toll on your body.
So let's zoom out to the big picture, because understanding this difference between a manageable risk and a stressful unknown is probably more important today than it's ever been.
You see, there's this concept in psychology called intolerance of uncertainty. It's basically how well or how poorly an individual can cope with the stress of not knowing what's coming next.
And it turns out that this is a core feature that runs through many different anxiety disorders. That struggle with the great unknown is a massive driver of anxiety.
And as you can probably guess, this gets turned up to 11 during times of widespread crisis. When everything from public health to the economy feels completely unpredictable, our collective uncertainty shoots through the roof, and our potential for anxiety goes right along with it.
So, what's the takeaway? Well, just being able to name what you're feeling is a huge first step. A risk is something you can analyze and prepare for, but uncertainty, that requires a totally different toolkit. It calls for things like tolerance, adaptability, and focusing only on what you can actually control. Knowing what you're truly facing is half the battle. So I'll leave you with this. Knowing the difference, how can you better navigate the uncertainties in your own life?